Well, I figured I'd give a quick update on the e-bike, the Carbon X, and the Hypercarbon X. Basically, there's been a few points of failure, and essentially, whenever you're doing a DIY e-bike, there's always going to be some kind of issues with it. It's just an inevitability. So, going over it real quick, of course, I've done some upgrades, so I'm going to go over some of the upgrades that I've done, go over the failure points that I've had, and then we're going to do a few other things in this video. So, first thing that you'll notice is right here on the motor that the paint is scraped off. Essentially, the derailleur on this is horribly cheap, very flimsy, and rubs up against it. So I had to tighten that all the way up to the point that I can't shift gears, at least the rear gear. So I only have 3 gears on the front derailleur. I do plan on replacing the front and rear the front sprocket and rear derailleur for this. But that's not the biggest concern that I have with the bike. That's not the biggest point of failure. That's no big deal. It's more of an annoyance. The biggest point of failure is here in the front wheel. Now, this is probably not going to pick up on camera very well, but you might be able to see this front wheel, or at least maybe hear it. This front wheel is completely wobbly. I was doing about 25 miles an hour, and at about 25 miles an hour, the front hub just basically failed. All of a sudden, the wheel started going like this. Luckily, I wasn't too far from home. I managed to slow down. I flipped the bike over, tried to repair it there on the side of the road, but that didn't work. So I just put it back on and walked the bike about a half mile home. So what am I going to do with it now? Basically, I've had a wheel on order as a result of the virus. Of course, everything's taking a long time. I could have spent almost $200 at a bike store to get the same rim. I chose to wait, save a little bit of money. So, one of the first things that I'm doing since I'm replacing the rim is I'm replacing the tires as well. And these are Schwab or Schwable, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce it. Tires that are actually rated for e-bike. The Snafu tires that actually come on this bike are really, really cheap. And I started thinking about it, and the speeds that I've been hitting on this bike, I really don't feel comfortable with these particular tires. I've had the bike on flat surface up to almost 37 miles an hour. I think it could probably go a little bit faster. There are some tuning things that I can do with the computer to bring it up to a little bit higher speed when I want to. But 36 miles an hour on this thing is more than adequate. Now, as far as things I've done, upgrades that I've done to the bike, I did add a light. I did have this bag from a previous bike that was supposed to be a phone holder, but it is converted into a battery holder for the light and a battery holder for a phone mount so that I can run my cell phone while I'm on the bike. I also did put a mirror on the bike so that I can see behind me without turning my head and crashing, as well as went ahead and put a rack and bags on the back end of the bike. As you can see, the rear tire is already changed out. I have the new tire on it. It works great. And then also, one thing is the brakes on this thing I don't feel are adequate based off the speeds that this bike can produce. So I am doing a conversion. I haven't done anything with the rear yet, but I did upgrade to a 203 millimeter rotor on the front. One thing that I found that was interesting, I assumed it was a 180 millimeter rotor on the front, simply because most mountain bikes come that way. And I was mistaken, it was a 160. But I managed to get the parts to upgrade that. If I can, I'll put some links in the description for Amazon to parts I use to do the upgrade. And then, if that's something that you want to do, then go ahead. So basically, that's about all I've done with the bike. Right now, what I'm going to do is a quick time lapse. I'm going to flip the bike over, take the front wheel off, and then I'm going to disassemble the front wheel so I can get the inner tube out of it. And then hopefully FedEx actually arrives pretty soon so that I can put the tire onto the new rim as well as the new disc rotor and get this thing back up and running. Okay, well, we got this thing pretty much well taken care of. It's completely disassembled, so now's the waiting game on FedEx. Let's hope it's not 8 o'clock tonight that they show up. FedEx, I don't know about you guys, but in my area, not the greatest delivery system in the world. So hopefully they show up and I can get all this clutter out of the way. But I will also do a time lapse putting everything back together. And who knows, sometime today I could have the bike back up and running. If so, I'll give it a quick test. And then in a later video, I'll go ahead and do some video of the actual bike performing. I just want to make sure that it's performing correctly. Anyways, with that said, now that I have this off, you can actually hear it when I bang on the thing, but this may not seem like a lot of play, but obviously it's enough to screw up the disc and do some other things to it. So this was a pretty catastrophic failure. This is obviously about the cheapest rim in the world that they could possibly put on the bike. So if you're going to buy this bike, I would highly recommend upgrading it. One of the things that I think about when, kind of a hindsight with this bike is that I saw another YouTuber who, I think it's Kev Central or something like that is the YouTube channel. Anyways, he upgraded to 27.5 inch wheels. And in hindsight, I think I should have done that myself. And it's a little late now because I already have the hub motor and everything, so upgrading the wheel would just be an additional expense I'm not going to undertake. But anyways, this is just an idea of the componentry that is really bad on this bike. I think the frame itself is good. So far, the front suspension has been okay. It did take some breaking in. You do have to break it in a bit, and then it starts to get a little bit more soft. But if this is something that I do plan on keeping long term, I'll probably upgrade the front suspension. So at this point, we're waiting for FedEx. Before I forget again, there's one other thing that I wanted to say just real quick. This bike, was converted from the very beginning, so it had 0 miles on it when I started. It has 223.5 miles on the clock at this particular point. Granted, that's not 100% accurate because it's a Chinese computer and it doesn't exactly sync up correctly with the speed. Speed's off just a little bit. When I did do the speed test, I was running GPS speed, so that's how I got nearly 37 miles an hour out of it. Anyways, so this failure happened a few hundred miles in, and that's just kind of one of the warnings that I wanted to give you guys. It's 200 miles on a rim on a bike, to have it just absolutely fail is pretty inexcusable. Granted, I'm running it a little bit harder than most, but this is just, it's just junk. Well, wonders never cease. FedEx actually showed up, brought the rims, so I'm going to do a time lapse again and put this thing together, and hopefully we'll have a fixed bike after this is done. Now that everything's buttoned up, I guess it's time to take it for a ride. I'm going to do a little bit of a shakedown on this, make sure that everything's functioning correctly, brakes are working good, there's no other additional issues, and then I'm going to do a follow-up video. The video is also going to include a bit of footage of me riding the bike, just so you guys can see it from my point of view. And please, if there's any questions, comments, leave them down below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you soon in the next video.